Hi there. I want to make a quick tutorial for you to show you how to do our most recent assignment in After Effects. So if you remember from class today being Wednesday, the 6th, April the 6th, we worked on a shot that resembled this. Okay, that is what we're doing in After Effects. So a couple of things going on here. We actually have to track the frame. We have to insert the picture into our tracked part of the image. And then we're also tweaking, skewing, I guess you could say, with a corner pin, the actual image to make it look perpendicular or flat to the camera and let it skew out of perspective as the shot moves forward. So let's take a look. I'm going to go to Premiere. I'm going to look at my rough cut. So what I've done is I've made a very rough cut of all of the shots in this commercial, starting with taking the picture, going all the way through the photographic process. Right here, I'm just going to turn this top layer off. We see our negative come in. The picture gets developed, and then it winds up on the canvas, and our artist looks favorably at her work of art. So that's what we're doing. Okay, so what I'm going to do first, I'm going to copy this footage right here. So what I didn't highlight, just Command C to copy. I'm going to go to After Effects and I'm going to make a new composition. To do that, I'm going to click Composition, New Composition. I'm going to make sure that all of my settings resemble my footage, or the same specifications as my footage. So I'm going to make sure it's 1920 by 1080. 23.976 frames per second is my frame rate. I want to make sure square pixels is selected. And background color, I'm not worried about that. Black is fine. It'll be covered up anyway. So I'm going to click OK. And I get a brand new comp. Right here you'll see Comp 5. We'll remember that name. Comp 5 is what we're working with. And we get a brand new blank timeline here in After Effects. So as you recall, in After Effects, we work with compositions. In Premiere, we work with sequences. So we have a brand new composition with a blank timeline. So I'm going to do Command V to paste. And let's see why that didn't work for me. Several people have been having issues with this, me included. There we go. Fifth time is a charm. So I have this footage in here now. I need to go back into Premiere and grab my still frame. There is my still frame. What I'd like to do now is actually just trim all of this up to make sure that I just have exactly the same length of my composition as the shot that I'm working with. In After Effects, we tend to just work with one shot at a time, whereas in Premiere, we'll work with many shots at a time. So I'm going to take my work area and zooming in just a bit just to make sure that I am getting this right down to the frame, taking my work area and placing it directly over the footage that I'm working with. I'm going to right click on that work area and trim comp to work area. Okay, this is great. So basically it just cut off the end of that and I wind up with a work area that is exactly the same length as my footage. Okay, this is great. I turn off my top layer, I have my footage, and there is my soon-to-be picture work of art that will populate that frame. Okay, back from a brief break. So, first things first, I'm going to turn off this top layer. We need to track this frame. We need to get tracking information. So as you recall, when we tracked our negative in our last lesson, we did it with motion tracking within After Effects. So, okay, and after another brief break, sorry, had to take care of a request. So, last time we did tracking, or we accomplished tracking data in After Effects through the built-in tracker within After Effects. We're going to use something different this time. We're going to use a plugin in After Effects called Mocha. This is a different type of tracking. This is called planar tracking, Planar. And if you can imagine this this picture frame, they make a plane. Think of it in geometric terms. They make a plane, and this plane can be tracked over time. Mocha is a planar tracker. So to access Mocha, I'm going to go up into my effects panel, search for Mocha, drag it onto my, actually, excuse me, that is the wrong shot. It goes on the bottom layer. I just hit Control Z to undo there. So we place it on the bottom layer. You'll notice I now have an effect in my effects stack. And it says Mocha. I'm going to click on the Mocha button, and if it says register, just do that later. I don't let them collect my data because I just don't prefer that. All right, so I'm going to just expand this out so we can see it. So you'll see that I'm now in a brand new interface. Mocha has several different looks to it. Personally, I don't like working in this layout. I like the classic layout. That's because mainly I learned in the classic layout and it's easier for me to use. So to each his own. Whenever I'm doing this, I'm always starting at the very first frame. And I'm using my tools up here to manipulate the canvas. So I need to zoom out just a bit, grab my hand tool, reposition this, and now I think I can begin. So I need to identify the area of the image that I would like Mocha to track. To do that, and I'm going to select my selection tool and look at this X box right here. This is not the video game, the X box. This is create a rectangular X spline layer. So I'm going to click that, and I'm just going to left click and drag a rough box over this entire frame. Now, once I do that, you'll notice I have a layer that pops up here in my layer stack. That's exactly what we want. I'm going to come in and modify these points. I'm just going to move them to outside this first dark line. I think that will work. Okay, I'm going to get it pretty close. Okay, once I have that, I have to do one more thing. I have to make sure that perspective is checked. So by default, translation, scale, rotation, and shear are selected. There's also a perspective shift in this camera move, so we need to make sure that's selected. What I'm going to do now is track forward, and it's going to take it a minute to get started. And once it starts, it's probably a good time to go grab a cup of coffee or do something else if you need to. Sometimes it can take a few minutes to go through the tracking process. I'm going to pause the video and I'll come back when it's done tracking. Okay, so our tracking is now complete. Well, the first part of it is actually. So I'm just going to scroll through here and just make sure that my track looks pretty good and it stays put on the frame, and it does. Okay, there are two more steps to this process that we have to do in order to make sure that we get the right data out of Mocha. The first second step is I need to click on Show Planar Surface. That is this this S box right here. These little blue brackets that you see, these are going to be where our picture actually winds up. So it's very important that we get these exactly where we want them. Take your time and be very deliberate with these. Now that I have that, I'm going to zoom in and use my hand tool and my selection tool to just fine tune it just a bit. Okay, looking good. Okay, I'm going to call that done. So we're going to zoom out, and I'm just going to check this one more time. I'm deliberately being very meticulous and slow here. I'm just going to play forward. By the way, these are the track buttons. What looks like play in reverse, but it has a T on it. That's track. You're going to use these to actually track your footage. These are just the regular playback buttons right here. So please don't mix these two up. They're two totally separate functions. All right, so I'm going to play that, and that looks pretty rock solid to me. I'm going to say that is a good track. It's going to continue to play forwards and backwards until I stop it. It's a little satisfying just watching that. And we're going to stop it. Okay, next is this. I'm going to zoom out just a bit. Okay, what I'm going to do now is with my selection tool, I'm going to click the Expand Planar Surface button. When I do click this, now let me pause there and just mention that I'm always making sure that this layer is selected. When this layer is selected, that's what makes everything, all the other tracking information selected for me to work with. Now, as I click this button, please notice that these brackets that I put in each of the four corners, they then expand out to the edge of the frame. So I click that, they expand out. This right here is exactly what it should look like right before you go back to After Effects. I'm going to go File, Save Project. At that point, I can close Mocha, and I am back in After Effects. Okay, great. Next step, I'm going to turn on the still frame layer, and let's try to make a photo that fits within that frame. I'm going to grab my rectangle tool. Now, one thing I will point out to you is this. Whenever you grab the rectangle tool, the way it works is that when you press down, so I'm going to left click and hold, you'll notice that everything goes away. Don't worry. It's going to start to draw a mask, and it will draw a mask on wherever you place it. So I'm still holding down the left mouse button, and I'll let go, and wherever I let go, that's where it puts the mask. I'm going to undo that and just try to get it a little bit more exact now. I'm going to make something that looks kind of like that, I think. Okay, From there, what I'm going to do is go into my transform properties and I'm going to scale. Let's scale it down just a bit. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to type in an effect, corner pin. What the corner pin effect is going to allow me to do, and just so you know, I'm placing it on the photo layer. What it's going to allow me to do is stretch each of these corners around any which way I would like, but it's going to allow me to stretch them around to be able to place this directly on the frame right where I would like it. So there we go. And it's a little bit of a push and pull. So as you start to manipulate these, you'll have to go back around and make subtle adjustments. Again, we're going for photorealism here. No pun intended. Photorealism. We want this to look like it actually is a picture in a frame. Nothing that was actually done in post-production. Once we have that, and we're satisfied with the look, we're going to take and right-click on this layer. We're going to pre-compose it. Again, when we pre-compose something, it takes everything that we have highlighted and it puts it in its own composition. Several uses for this. This one, it takes everything that we have, all this tracking data applied to it, and allows it to go onto a layer that is masked and skewed. So the tracking data that we're actually going to apply comes from the Mocha AE effect that we've already used to track this layer. I'm going to go to the tracking data portion of the effect, and again, I'm going to be sure that I'm starting on my first frame. Kind of looks weird if you just play it like that. So starting on the first frame, I'm going to create track data. Make sure layer 1 is clicked, click OK. From there, I'm going to select corner pin support motion blur. And then from there to layer export 2, I'm going to pick our still. All right, once we have all of that selected, I click apply export. And if everything goes correctly, it should be a non-triumphant change. Nothing should change until you start to move your cursor. Then at that point, you should see it track with you. So I'm going to play it. That looks pretty solid to me. Okay, great. Now, for the very last step of this process, we need to skew this entire image to make it appear that the camera was directly in front of the picture, that it wasn't off to the side as it was when it was actually shot. So how do we do that? We are going to take and combine these two layers, and you'll never guess, we're going to pre-compose it. So we pre-compose it. We're going to move all attributes into the new composition. And I'm just going to call this framed photo. Warped. Okay, framed photo warped. This is probably the easiest part of this process because what we're going to do is take and drop that corner pin effect once again. So I had already had it searched up and had it here ready to go. So I took and applied the corner pin effect once again to this layer. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually perform an animation using this corner pin effect. I'm going to look at this and I'm going to decide where I want the animation to end. And I would like it to end right before she comes into frame. So I'm going to bring her into frame here and then back out just a little bit. That's where I'd like it to end. So you'll notice that there are stopwatches all along this effect. For every single point in this effect, there's a stopwatch. That means we can keyframe each one of these points and make an animation. So I'm going to click the stopwatch in all four instances. And just to kind of show you what's going on under the hood, what I'm going to do is go into my effects down in the timeline here. This is a readout basically of what I'm doing up here. So we can actually see the keyframes on the timeline within the composition. So when I clicked these stopwatches, I had a keyframe that was assigned to each of these. Now when I move the cursor or the playhead to a different time, whenever I touch and move one of these corner pins, it's going to automatically create a new keyframe right at that point. So I'm going to zoom out just a little bit. I say that I have a very touchy mouse. And I'm going to start to really just eyeball this into position. I'm going to take each of these four corners and I'm grabbing onto these little round handles, these digital handles. And I'm trying to make something that looks somewhat square-ish, although the picture itself is not square. Maybe something like that. And again, as I did that, you'll see that keyframes were now laid down right here on these tracks. All right, I have an animation now that skews almost imperceptibly. And you can see the skew happening with these corner pins as they actually move into position as I scroll along here. Excellent. Okay, so some finishing ideas here. We need to turn this black and white. And to do that, that's a very easy step. I'm just going to type in hue, saturation. I thought I was going to do that. Let's just type in hue. Drop it on the layer. In master saturation, just bring that down to 0. The shot's a little dark for my liking. This is an optional step, but I'm going to brighten it up just a little bit. And I'm just going to zoom in just so I can see, get a better idea of what I'm doing. So I put a curves effect on after I drop the saturation. And I'm just going to click right here in the middle of my curve and just raise this up a little bit. And then whenever I'm color correcting or doing any type of grading adjustment, I always do an off and on just to kind of see what's happening. Maybe I'll put that about right there. Bring this down just a bit maybe. Not too much. We can really go crazy here with it. That's too crazy. We're almost there. That's where we started, and that's where we're at now. Okay, let's leave it like that for right now. All right, so I'm going to save that. And Incidentally, you can also do that in Premiere Pro. So if you want to leave the shot just like this coming out of After Effects, you can certainly do that, and then do that color or do the contrast process in Premiere Pro, and that might be better for you because it will let you do that side by side with your other shots. For right now, I just want to turn this on just because I like the way it looks. And why not? Okay, so from here we have to get the shot out of After Effects. How do we do that? We go up to Composition and we click Add to Render Queue. So what it's going to do, it's going to take the contents of that timeline and it's going to put it in our render queue. And we have to change a few things before we actually click the render button. First off is output module. I click on the link where it says lossless. I'm going to make sure that QuickTime is selected. I select ProRes 422, click OK, and then click OK. And then output 2, this is where I'd like it to be saved. I'm going to call this, let's see, framed pick at end. I forget what I've called it before, but hey, why not? That'll work. I'm going to open that up a little bit. I have a directory where these are going, and they are going. Here we go. TCC Photospot VFX. VFX stands for visual effects, and that's what we're working on now. These are visual effects. This didn't happen in real life. We did it in post and made it look real. TCC Photospot VFX renders. I click Save, and then from there, what I'm going to do is click Render. And it's going to create my video frame by frame. You must be patient. Actually, computers today move very fast. There was a time in which I would have had to wait 10 to 15 minutes for something like this to render. And at that point, we are done. Let's go and take a look at it real quick. You always want to check your work just to make sure that it came out the way that you intended. So I'm going to come back here and then come back into my directory, Photospot VFX renders. And what did I call that? Frame pick it in. That's the one I just made. And let's preview it. Okay, sure, I'll buy that. You know, not perfect. I can kind of pick it apart a little bit, but yeah, let's go with that for right now. So that is the process. I hope it treats you well. This is kind of a fun project. It's challenging, but it also helps you grow as a future post-production professional. So thank you for your time and attention. I appreciate it. And if you have any questions at all, please let me know. Thanks.